Emma Porter stood frozen at the altar, her white lace dress stark against the golden backdrop of Angels Camp's small whitewashed church. The pews were filled with the town's finest, all eyes fixed on her with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. Richard Blackstone was nowhere to be found. Her fiancé, the man who had promised to cherish her forever, had abandoned her without so much as a note of explanation. The weight of this betrayal pressed down on her chest, making it difficult to breathe as whispers echoed through the chapel. The spring day in 1876 had dawned with such promise, but now as the minutes ticked by on the church clock, that promise withered like flowers left too long in the California sun. Emma's father, George Porter, a respected merchant in Angels Camp, stood beside his daughter, his face flushing a deeper shade of red with each passing minute. "He's not coming," Emma whispered, finally accepting what everyone else already knew. Her mother released a stifled sob from the front pew. The Reverend cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Perhaps we should. I think we're done here," George Porter announced, his voice carrying through the church. "My apologies to all who have come. There will be no wedding today." Emma's vision blurred with unshed tears as her father led her back down the aisle, past the faces of neighbors, friends, and acquaintances who had come to celebrate her happiness. Now they would leave with gossip that would spread through Angels Camp faster than wildfire in a drought. Outside the church, she paused to catch her breath, her corset suddenly feeling like a vise around her ribs. The April sunshine seemed to mock her with its cheerfulness, illuminating the dusty main street of Angels Camp, a booming mining town that had sprung up during the gold rush days and managed to maintain its prosperity even as other camps dwindled. "I'm taking Emma home," her father told her mother, his voice strained with controlled fury. "Agnes, see to our guests. Tell them whatever you must." As her father helped Emma into their carriage, she caught sight of a man across the street, leaning against a hitching post outside the saloon. Unlike the churchgoers in their Sunday best, he wore dusty riding clothes and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face. But she could feel his eyes on her, watching with interest as her life collapsed around her. "Who is that man?" she asked her father as he climbed into the driver's seat. George glanced across the street and frowned. "Just some cowboy, one of many passing through." "Don't concern yourself with him, Emma. We have more pressing matters." Emma couldn't explain why. In the midst of her humiliation and heartbreak, she found herself looking back at the stranger as the carriage pulled away. There was something in his stance, a quiet confidence, that seemed so at odds with her current state of devastation. When they arrived at the Porter family home, a handsome two-story residence on the edge of town, that spoke of George's success in the mercantile business, Emma immediately retreated to her bedroom. She tore at the buttons of her wedding gown, desperate to be free of the garment that now represented her shame. There was a gentle knock at her door. "Emma, may I come in?" It was her younger sister, Rebecca, only 17 but wise beyond her years. "Yes," Emma replied, her voice barely audible. Rebecca entered and rushed to help her sister with the stubborn buttons. "I'm so sorry, Emma. No one understands why Richard would do such a thing. Father is beside himself." "I imagine he's concerned about the money he spent on this wedding," Emma said bitterly. "No, he's worried about you," Rebecca insisted. "We all are." Once freed from her wedding dress, Emma sat heavily on her bed, staring at the wall. "What am I going to do, Becca? Everyone in town saw. Everyone will know." Rebecca sat beside her, taking her hand. "You'll hold your head high because you've done nothing wrong. Richard Blackstone is the coward, not you." Despite her sister's reassurances, Emma knew that Angels Camp would be abuzz with speculation for weeks. Some would pity her, others would whisper that there must have been a reason for Richard's desertion. The thought of facing them all made her stomach churn. As twilight settled over Angels Camp, Emma remained sequestered in her room, declining dinner and visitors. Her mother had returned, bringing a parade of concerned neighbors bearing sympathy and casseroles, but Emma couldn't face them. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. She gazed out her window at the silhouette of the mountains beyond town, wondering if Richard had fled in that direction. Where had he gone? Why had he left? After 2 years of courtship, she had thought she knew him. Now she wondered if she'd known him at all. The next morning, Emma woke with swollen eyes and a raw throat. For a blessed moment, she remembered nothing, and then the events of the previous day crashed down upon her. She would have stayed in bed if not for the insistent knocking at the front door that eventually roused her curiosity. Donning a simple day dress and quickly pinning up her chestnut hair, she crept down the stairs, pausing when she heard male voices in her father's study. "I appreciate your concern, Sheriff Davis, but I can handle this matter myself," her father was saying. "I understand that, George, but a man doesn't just disappear on his wedding day without a reason. There could be foul play involved." Emma's breath caught. She hadn't considered that something might have happened to Richard. Despite her anger and humiliation, the thought that he might be hurt sent a chill through her. "The boy's a coward, plain and simple," her father replied. "His clothes are gone, his horse is missing, and he cleared out his account at the bank 2 days ago. That's not the work of bandits, that's premeditation." "All the same, I'll ask around," Sheriff Davis said, "for your daughter's sake, if nothing else." When the sheriff left, Emma entered her father's study, finding him slumped in his leather chair, looking older than his 55 years. "Good morning, Father," he straightened, his expression softening. "Emma, how are you feeling today?" "Like a fool," she answered honestly. "But I want to know what happens with the sheriff's investigation." "There's nothing to investigate. Richard ran, Emma. He's a spineless." He broke off, clearly not wanting to upset her further. "Your mother has breakfast waiting if you're hungry." Emma wasn't, but she nodded anyway, knowing it would please him. As she turned to leave, her father called after her. "Emma, there's something else you should know. Richard's father came by earlier. He's embarrassed by his son's behavior. The loan I extended to help them expand their ranch, he's not sure when they can repay it now." Emma felt her cheeks burn with renewed humiliation. Of course, there were business entanglements as well. Her father had invested in Richard's family ranch, anticipating the merger of the two families. Now that investment was in jeopardy. "I'm sorry, Father. I know you trusted him because of me." "Nonsense," her father said firmly. "This isn't your fault, but I'm afraid we may need to tighten our belts until the matter is resolved." Throughout the day, visitors continued to arrive at the Porter home. Emma's closest friend, Mary Sullivan, came with fresh bread and uncharacteristic restraint in her questioning. The Reverend's wife brought flowers and scripture. Others brought food and thinly veiled curiosity. Emma endured it all with as much grace as she could muster, though each sympathetic glance felt like a needle piercing her pride. By late afternoon, she couldn't bear another moment indoors. "I'm going for a walk," she announced to no one in particular, grabbing her shawl and slipping out the back door before anyone could object. The town was busy with the usual afternoon activities. Wagons rumbled down the main street, miners fresh off shift headed to the saloons, and ladies finished their shopping before dinner preparations. Emma kept her head down, choosing the less traveled side streets, but it didn't save her from notice. "Miss Porter," a male voice called, and she looked up to see Mr. Henderson, the bank manager. "I was so sorry to hear about your situation. If there's anything I can do, thank you, but we're managing," Emma said stiffly, quickening her pace. She continued walking, eventually finding herself at the edge of town near the livery stable. The familiar smells of hay and horses were oddly comforting. Her father had taught her to ride when she was young, and though Richard had considered it improper for a lady to ride astride, she had missed those carefree gallops across the foothills. "Miss Porter," Emma startled, turning to find a tall man standing a few feet away. It took her a moment to recognize him as the cowboy she'd seen outside the saloon the day before. Up close, she could see he was perhaps a few years older than her own 23 years, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His dark blonde hair curled slightly where it emerged from beneath his hat. "I'm sorry to trouble you," he said when she didn't respond. "I wanted to offer my condolences." Emma stiffened. "Have we been introduced, sir?" A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "No, madam, we haven't." "Rudy Lawson, at your service." He tipped his hat slightly. "Mr. Lawson, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not in need of condolences from strangers." "Not condolences, then. How about a fresh perspective?" He leaned against the fence post, studying her with those startlingly blue eyes. "That man who left you at the altar. His loss is my greatest fortune." Emma's mouth fell open at his boldness. "I beg your pardon. Just speaking the truth, Miss Porter. Any man fool enough to run out on a woman like you doesn't deserve a second thought. But his mistake gives the rest of us a chance we wouldn't have had otherwise." Heat rushed to Emma's cheeks, partly from indignation and partly from something else she wasn't ready to examine. "You're being highly inappropriate, Mr. Lawson." "Maybe so," he agreed easily. "But sometimes the truth is inappropriate. You know nothing about me or my situation. I know enough. I know that Angel's Camp has been buzzing about the beautiful Miss Porter being left at the altar. I know that you're out here alone when most women would still be hiding away. That tells me you've got spirit." Despite herself, Emma was intrigued by this stranger who spoke so forthrightly. "And what brings you to Angel's Camp, Mr. Lawson? You're obviously not from around here." "I'm working for the Hendersons, driving cattle to their new grazing land." "Been here about a week, staying on a few more." He straightened from the fence. "And I'd be honored if you'd join me for supper one evening." Emma couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Mr. Lawson, I was to be married yesterday. I hardly think it's appropriate for me to be dining with another man today." "But you weren't married, were you?" he pointed out gently. "And life's too short to waste time on what might have been. You strike me as a practical woman, Miss Porter. Isn't a meal with pleasant company better than sitting alone with your thoughts?" His logic was disarming, but Emma shook her head. "I couldn't possibly. The gossip will happen regardless," Rudy finished for her. "At least give them something interesting to talk about." A laugh escaped her before she could stop it. "You are the most forward man I've ever encountered." "I'll take that as a compliment." His grin was infectious. "Think about it, Miss Porter. I'll be at the hotel restaurant tomorrow at 7. If you decide to join me, I'll be the happiest man in Angel's Camp." With a tip of his hat, he turned and walked away, leaving Emma staring after him in bewilderment. She should have been offended by his presumption, but instead, she felt something she hadn't expected, a tiny spark of excitement amid the ashes of her humiliation. When Emma returned home, she found her mother waiting with a worried expression. "Where have you been?" "It's not proper for you to be wandering about town alone, especially now." "I needed fresh air, Mother," Emma replied, removing her shawl. "And I'm hardly the first woman to be jilted. Life must go on." Agnes Porter frowned. "Of course it must, but with dignity. Your father and I were discussing this earlier. Perhaps you should visit your Aunt Martha in San Francisco for a while. Give people time to forget." "Forget," Emma echoed. "Mother, I have no intention of running away from Angel's Camp. This is my home." "But the talk, Emma, people can be cruel." "Let them talk. I've done nothing wrong." Her mother sighed, reaching out to smooth Emma's wind-blown hair. "You've always been so stubborn, just like your father." Emma managed a small smile. "Speaking of father, where is he?" "At the mercantile. There's been some issue with a late shipment." Agnes hesitated. "He's worried about finances, Emma, with the loan to the Blackstones in question." "I know, Mother, he mentioned it." Emma felt fresh guilt washing over her. Her failed wedding was causing problems for her entire family. "We'll manage," Agnes said quickly. "We always do. Now come help me with dinner. Keeping busy is the best remedy for a broken heart." Emma wasn't sure her heart was broken. Bruised, certainly. Humiliated, absolutely. But as she helped her mother prepare the evening meal, she realized that what hurt most was her wounded pride. Had she truly loved Richard, or had she simply loved the idea of being a respectable married woman? The question troubled her more than she cared to admit. That night, as she prepared for bed, Emma found herself thinking of Rudy Lawson's bold invitation. There was something refreshing about his straightforward manner after years of navigating the careful social protocols of Angel's Camp. Richard had always been so concerned with appearances, with doing everything properly. Perhaps that was why he'd left without confronting her. He couldn't bear the scene it would have caused. Emma lay awake long into the night, her mind spinning with questions about Richard, about Rudy, about her own uncertain future. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were a confusing blend of wedding veils and wide open spaces, of disapproving glances and startling blue eyes. The next morning, Emma rose early, determined to face whatever the day might bring. After breakfast, she announced her intention to go to the mercantile to help her father. "Are you certain that's wise?" her mother asked. "People will be curious." "They can be curious all they want," Emma replied. "I can't hide forever." With her head held high, Emma walked through Angel's camp to her father's store. The morning sun was warm on her face, and she tried to draw strength from it. Yes, there were stares and whispers as she passed, but there were also kind nods from those who had known her all her life. The mercantile was busy when she arrived, with miners stocking up on supplies and ranch wives selecting dry goods. A hush fell over the store when she entered, followed by an awkward resumption of conversation. Emma ignored it, making her way to the back office where she found her father reviewing ledgers. "Emma," he said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I came to help," she said simply. "You're short-handed since Thomas left, aren't you?" Her father studied her face. "You don't have to do this." "I want to," she insisted. "I need to keep busy, father." After a moment, he nodded. "All right, then. Mrs. Wilson has an order to be filled. The list is on the counter." Emma spent the morning assisting customers and organizing stock. Most people were polite, if somewhat reserved. A few were openly sympathetic, which was almost worse than the whispers. But by midday, she had settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. She was arranging a display of canned goods when the bell above the door jingled, and Rudy Lawson walked in. His eyes found her immediately, and a slow smile spread across his face. Emma felt a strange flutter in her stomach. "Miss Porter," he greeted her, tipping his hat. "I didn't expect to find you here." "I'm helping my father," she replied, conscious of the curious glances from other customers. "What can I help you with, Mr. Lawson?" "I need a few things for the trail," he said, handing her a short list. "Jerky, coffee, that sort of thing." Emma nodded briskly, all business despite her racing pulse. "I'll gather these for you." As she collected his supplies, she was acutely aware of him watching her. When she returned with his order, he leaned slightly closer than necessary across the counter. "Have you thought about my invitation?" he asked quietly. Emma glanced around, but no one seemed to be paying them any attention. "Mr. Lawson, Rudy," he corrected. "And before you say no, let me remind you that dinner is just dinner. Good food, good conversation, nothing improper about that." "There's everything improper about it, given the circumstances," she whispered. His eyes held hers. "The circumstances are that you're a free woman, Emma Porter, free to make your own choices." The way he said her name sent a shiver down her spine. She should refuse him outright, send him on his way. Instead, she found herself saying, "I'll think about it." The smile that lit up his face was dazzling. "That's all I ask. 7 o'clock at the hotel restaurant." He paid for his supplies, tipped his hat once more, and left the store, whistling. Emma's father emerged from the back room moments later. "Was that the cowboy you asked about?" "The one who was watching from across the street on Sunday." "Yes," Emma admitted, flushing. "He's working for the Hendersons." George frowned. "He seemed rather familiar with you." "We've spoken briefly," Emma said evasively. "He was just being friendly, father." Her father didn't look convinced. "Be careful, Emma. Men like that drifters, they don't stay in one place long." "I'm well aware of that," she said, more sharply than she intended. After all, Richard had been a respectable local boy from a good family, and that hadn't prevented him from vanishing without a trace. The rest of the afternoon passed quickly, and as closing time approached, Emma found herself increasingly preoccupied with thoughts of Rudy's invitation. What would people say if she were seen dining with another man so soon after being jilted? Would it confirm the gossip's suspicions that there had been something wrong with her that drove Richard away? And yet, the alternative was to hide away, to act as though she were in mourning for a marriage that never happened. The thought of facing the evening alone in the house with her parents' concerned glances was suddenly unbearable. "Father," she said as they prepared to close the store, "I've been invited to dinner this evening." He looked up sharply. "By whom?" Emma hesitated. "By Mr. Lawson." "The cowboy who was in earlier." George's expression darkened. "Absolutely not, Emma. It's not proper." "What's not proper is allowing Richard's actions to dictate how I live my life," Emma countered, surprised at her own boldness. "It's just dinner, father, in a public place. It's too soon." "People will talk. People are already talking." At least this way, I'm living on my terms, not hiding away in shame. Her father studied her with a mixture of concern and pride. You've always had a strong will, Emma, just like your mother, though she'd never admit it. He sighed. If you're determined to go, I can't stop you. You're a grown woman, but be careful. Your heart is vulnerable right now. My heart is not involved, Emma assured him, though she wasn't entirely convinced of that herself. It's just dinner. When Emma arrived home, she went straight upstairs to change. She selected a dress of deep blue that she'd purchased for her honeymoon trip, a trip that would never happen now. The irony wasn't lost on her as she styled her hair in a simple but elegant arrangement. You look lovely, Rebecca said from the doorway. Where are you going? Emma explained about the dinner invitation, expecting her sister to be shocked. Instead, Rebecca clapped her hands in delight. Oh, Emma, how exciting. Is he handsome? Despite her nervousness, Emma smiled. Very. But that's not why I'm going. I just need to get out of the house to show everyone that I'm not devastated by what happened. Even though you are, Rebecca said softly. I'm hurt and humiliated, Emma admitted. But devastated, I don't know. Shouldn't I be more heartbroken if I truly loved Richard? Rebecca sat on the edge of the bed. Maybe you're still in shock. Or maybe you're stronger than you realize. Or maybe I never really loved him at all, Emma whispered, voicing the thought that had been troubling her since the wedding day. What if I was just going through the motions, doing what was expected of me? Only you can answer that, her sister replied. But this dinner might help you figure it out. At the very least, it will give you something else to think about. When Emma descended the stairs, her mother was waiting, her expression a mixture of concern and resignation. Your father told me about your plans. I wish you would reconsider, Emma. I'll be at the hotel restaurant in full view of everyone, Mother. There's nothing scandalous about that. Agnes sighed. Be home by 10, please, and remember who you are. I'm unlikely to forget, Emma said, kissing her mother's cheek before leaving the house. The walk to the hotel took only a few minutes, but it felt like a gauntlet. Emma was conscious of every person she passed, wondering what they were thinking. By the time she reached the hotel, her confidence was flagging. Perhaps this had been a mistake after all. But then she stepped into the restaurant and saw Rudy waiting at a table near the window. He stood when he saw her, his face lighting up with a smile that made her momentary doubts fade away. You came, he said simply, pulling out her chair. Against my better judgment, she replied, settling into her seat. The best decisions often are, he signaled the waiter. I took the liberty of ordering wine. I hope that's acceptable, Emma nodded, taking in his appearance. He'd cleaned up nicely, his hair freshly washed and his clothes, while still those of a working man, were neat and well kept. Without his hat, she could see the golden highlights in his hair that the sun had put there. You're staring, Miss Porter, he said with amusement. Emma blushed. I was just noticing that you clean up well for a cowboy, and you look beautiful, he replied without hesitation. Though I imagine you always do. The directness of his compliment flustered her. Richard had always been so measured with his praise, so proper. Mr. Lawson, Rudy, he corrected again, and I hope I can call you Emma, she hesitated, then nodded. Rudy, I should be clear about something. I'm not looking for. That is, this dinner doesn't mean. It means you were hungry and wanted company, he supplied easily. Nothing more, nothing less, unless you decide otherwise. The waiter arrived with their wine and they ordered their meals. As the evening progressed, Emma found herself relaxing in Rudy's company. He told her about growing up on a small ranch in Texas, about his years driving cattle across the country, about the places he'd seen and the people he'd met. What about your family? She asked. Do you ever visit them? A shadow crossed his face. My parents passed years ago. The ranch wasn't doing well and they worked themselves to exhaustion trying to save it. After they died, I sold what was left to pay off their debts and started working cattle drives. I'm sorry, Emma said sincerely. That must have been difficult, he shrugged. Life is often difficult. What matters is how you face it. His gaze met hers. Like what you're doing now, coming out to dinner instead of hiding away, that takes courage, or foolishness, Emma said wryly. I'm sure half the town is talking about us at this very moment. Let them talk, Rudy said, echoing her own words to her mother. What do you care what people think? It's not so simple, Emma explained. My father's business depends on his reputation. My behavior reflects on him. Rudy considered this. Fair enough, but there's a difference between being mindful of others and letting their opinions cage you. Your fiancé running out on you, that wasn't your doing. Why should you be the one to hide away in shame? His perspective was refreshing, and Emma found herself nodding. That's essentially what I told my parents, though I'm not sure they were convinced. Parents rarely are, Rudy said with a grin. Mine certainly never were. They wanted me to be a farmer, stay in one place, but I always had wanderlust. Is that why you became a cowboy, to travel? Partly. And partly because I'm good with horses, not so good with people. His smile turned self-deprecating. At least not until recently. Emma felt a blush creeping up her neck. Are you always this forward, Mr. Lawson? Only when I meet someone worth being forward with, he replied, his blue eyes serious despite his smile. Life's too short for games, Emma. I say what I mean and mean what I say. And what exactly are you saying? She asked, surprising herself with her boldness. I'm saying that I'd like to get to know you better. That I think Richard Blackstone is the biggest fool in California for leaving you. And that I'm glad he did, because otherwise I'd never have had the chance to sit across from you like this. Emma took a sip of her wine, using the moment to collect her thoughts. You're leaving soon, you said so yourself. I did, he acknowledged. But routes can change, plans can change, if there's something or someone worth staying for. The implications of his words hung in the air between them. Emma knew she should change the subject, maintain a proper distance. Instead, she found herself asking, have you ever found something worth staying for before? Not until now, he said quietly. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of conversation that ranged from books they had read to places they had visited. Emma was surprised to discover that despite his rough exterior, Rudy was well-read and thoughtful. He listened when she spoke, asked questions that showed genuine interest, and made her laugh in a way she hadn't in a long time, perhaps ever. When the meal ended, he walked her home through the twilit streets of Angel's Camp. They were quiet for much of the journey, but it was a comfortable silence. At her front gate, he stopped. Thank you for joining me tonight, Emma. Thank you for inviting me, she replied, suddenly shy. I had a lovely time. He reached for her hand, raising it to his lips in a gesture that was both old-fashioned and thrilling. May I call on you again? Perhaps take you riding tomorrow afternoon. Emma hesitated. She could almost hear her mother's objections, see the raised eyebrows of Angel's Camp's matrons. But the memory of the evening's conversations, of feeling alive and interesting and appreciated, overrode her caution. Yes, she said. I'd like that. His smile was worth whatever gossip might come her way. Until tomorrow, then. With a gentle squeeze of her hand, he released her and stepped back. Sweet dreams, Emma Porter. She watched him walk away before entering her house, where her parents and sister were waiting in the parlor, attempting to look casual, though it was clear they had been watching for her return. Did you have a nice evening? Her mother asked, her tone carefully neutral. Very nice, Emma replied. Mr. Lawson is quite interesting. He's taking me riding tomorrow afternoon. She expected protests, but to her surprise, her father merely nodded. If you're going riding, you should take Thomas with you. He can serve as a chaperone. Thomas was the 16-year-old boy who helped at the mercantile. Emma almost objected after all. She was 23, hardly a child in need of supervision, but she recognized the compromise when she heard it. That's fine, father. Thank you. As Emma prepared for bed that night, she found herself humming a tune Rudy had whistled earlier. For the first time since the disastrous wedding day, her thoughts weren't consumed with Richard's betrayal or the town's gossip. Instead, they were filled with images of sun-bleached hair and eyes blue as a summer sky, of easy laughter and honest conversation. Well, how was it? Rebecca asked, slipping into Emma's room in her nightgown. Is he as handsome up close? What did you talk about? Emma laughed, feeling lighter than she had in days. Yes, he's handsome, and kind, and interesting. We talked about everything: his travels, books, his time in Texas. You like him, Rebecca observed with a knowing smile. It was just dinner, Emma protested, though her flushed cheeks belied her casual tone. MMHMM, her sister replied skeptically. And now you're going riding together. Just 2 dinners and a ride with a handsome cowboy, nothing special at all. Emma threw a pillow at her and Rebecca dodged it with a giggle. "You're impossible." "And you're smitten," Rebecca countered. "It's wonderful to see you smile again, Emma." After her sister left, Emma stood by her window, looking out at the stars that hung over Angel's camp. Was she being foolish, letting herself be charmed by a wandering cowboy so soon after being abandoned at the altar? Perhaps. But for the first time in years, she felt truly alive, making choices based on what she wanted rather than what was expected of her. With that thought warming her heart, Emma Porter drifted off to sleep, no longer dreading the dawn. The next morning dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for riding. Emma rose early, selecting a practical riding outfit that her mother frowned at but didn't comment on. After a quick breakfast, she headed to the mercantile to help her father until her afternoon ride. The store was unusually busy, and Emma was grateful for the distraction. She worked diligently, filling orders and arranging displays. Around noon, Sheriff Davis entered, nodding to George Porter before approaching Emma. "Miss Porter, do you have a moment?" Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Of course, Sheriff. Is there news about Richard?" The sheriff's weathered face was grim, in a manner of speaking. "I've just received a telegram from Sacramento. It seems Mr. Blackstone was seen boarding a train to San Francisco the day before your wedding. He purchased a ticket all the way to New York." The news hit Emma like a physical blow. New York. Richard had fled not just Angel's camp but California entirely. The finality of it stole her breath for a moment. "I see," she managed. "Thank you for telling me." "There's more," Sheriff Davis said hesitantly. "He wasn't alone, he was traveling with a woman." The mercantile suddenly felt too warm, the walls closing in. "A woman?" "A Miss Clara Wilson. I believe she was a friend of your family, Clara Wilson." The name echoed in Emma's head. Clara with her golden curls and perfect manners. Clara who had helped Emma select her wedding dress. Clara who had been conspicuously absent from the wedding. "Yes," Emma said faintly. "Clara was a friend." The sheriff squeezed her shoulder awkwardly. "I'm sorry to be the bearer of such news, Miss Porter. For what it's worth, the entire town is on your side in this matter." Emma nodded, unable to form words around the lump in her throat. When the sheriff left, her father came to her side immediately. "Emma, are you all right? Why don't you go home and rest? Thomas and I can manage here." She shook her head, straightening her shoulders. "No, I'd rather stay busy." "But thank you, Father." George studied her face. "You're stronger than I give you credit for, Emma Porter." She managed a weak smile. "I come from sturdy stock." The news about Clara and Richard spread through Angel's camp like wildfire, and by early afternoon, Emma had endured countless sympathetic glances and whispered conversations that stopped when she approached. Each one stung, but not as deeply as she might have expected. The betrayal felt more like an insult to her pride than a wound to her heart. When the clock struck 3, Emma removed her apron. "I'm going riding now, Father. I'll be back for supper." George nodded. "Thomas is ready whenever you are. Be careful, Emma." Thomas was waiting outside with 3 horses, one for Emma, one for himself, and one for Rudy, who was approaching from the direction of the hotel. Emma's spirits lifted at the sight of him, dressed in his riding clothes with his hat tipped back to reveal his face. "Afternoon, Miss Porter," he called, his smile warming her despite the chill the sheriff's news had left. "Beautiful day for a ride." "It is indeed, Mr. Lawson," she replied, conscious of Thomas's curious gaze. Rudy nodded to the boy. "You must be Thomas. George told me you'd be joining us." Thomas puffed up a bit at being addressed directly. "Yes, sir. Mr. Porter asked me to come along." "Good man. You know the trails around here better than I do, I'd wager." With Thomas suitably impressed by Rudy's friendly manner, they mounted their horses and set off. Emma had selected a route that would take them into the foothills, away from town and curious eyes. Thomas rode a discreet distance behind them, close enough to serve as chaperone but far enough to allow for private conversation. "You seem troubled today," Rudy observed once they were away from town. "Has something happened?" Emma hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "Sheriff Davis received a telegram this morning. Richard has gone to New York, with Clara Wilson, a woman I considered a friend." Rudy's expression darkened. "I'm sorry, Emma, that's a double betrayal." "The strange thing is I'm more angry than heartbroken," she admitted. I keep wondering how I could have been so blind, how I could have believed myself in love with a man capable of such deception. People show us what they want us to see, Rudy said thoughtfully. And sometimes we see what we expect to see, not what's really there. What did you expect to see when you came to Angel's camp? Emma asked, curious. He smiled. Certainly not you, but I'm glad I found you all the same. They rode in companionable silence for a while, climbing higher into the hills where wildflowers painted the meadows in splashes of color. The air was fragrant with pine and spring blossoms, and Emma felt her spirits lifting with each mile they put between themselves and Angel's camp. It's beautiful up here, Rudy said, reining in his horse at the crest of a hill that offered a panoramic view of the valley below. Makes a man understand why people fight so hard for land. Have you ever wanted land of your own? Emma asked. He nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. I've dreamed of it, a place where I could raise horses, maybe cattle, somewhere with good water and room to breathe. He glanced at her. What about you, Emma? What do you dream of? The question caught her off guard. No one had asked about her dreams in a long time. As a merchant's daughter, her path had seemed predetermined: marriage to a respectable man, a household to manage, children to raise. I used to dream of adventure, she said slowly, of seeing places I've only read about in books, San Francisco, New York, maybe even Europe. She smiled ruefully. Childish fantasies, I suppose. Not childish at all, Rudy countered. The world's a big place, Emma Porter. No reason you shouldn't see as much of it as you want to. The simplicity of his statement struck her. Why shouldn't she? She was young, unmarried, and while not wealthy, certainly not destitute. Yet she had never seriously considered the possibility of traveling for pleasure, of seeking adventure rather than settling down. They dismounted to let the horses rest and to enjoy the view. Thomas, ever dutiful, remained on his horse a short distance away, his attention politely diverted. Tell me more about your travels, Emma said, settling onto a fallen log. Where's the most beautiful place you've seen? Rudy sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, but not so close as to be improper. There's a valley in Colorado where the mountains rise up like they're touching the sky. When the sun sets, they turn purple and gold. I camped there one summer, and I swear I could have stayed forever if winter hadn't been coming. The way he described it made Emma feel as though she were there, seeing it through his eyes. Why didn't you go back? Never found the right time, I suppose, or the right reason. He turned to look at her directly. Until now, I've never much minded the moving. There's always another horizon, another job, another town, but lately I've been thinking it might be nice to put down roots somewhere. There was a question in his eyes that Emma wasn't ready to answer. She changed the subject slightly. What brought you to Angel's camp specifically? There are plenty of ranches looking for hands. Fate, maybe, he said with a half smile. I met Henderson in Stockton. He offered good wages and I needed work. Simple as that. He paused. Though now I'm thinking there might have been more to it. Such as? Emma asked, her pulse quickening. Such as meeting a woman who makes me reconsider my wandering ways. Emma looked away, heat rising in her cheeks. You hardly know me, Rudy. I know enough, he said simply. I know you're brave and proud and kind. I know you've got a sharp mind and a good heart. I know that when you smile, it lights up your whole face in a way that makes a man want to keep you smiling forever. His words stirred something in Emma that she'd never felt before, not with Richard, not with anyone. It was a feeling of possibility, of doors opening rather than closing. I was engaged to be married 4 days ago, she reminded him. This is all happening very fast. Life happens fast sometimes, Rudy replied. The question is whether you ride with it or against it. Before Emma could respond, Thomas called out, Miss Porter, Mr. Lawson, we should head back soon if we're to make it home by supper. Rudy stood, offering Emma his hand. The boy's right. Your father would have my hide if I kept you out after dark. Emma placed her hand in his, feeling the strength and calluses that spoke of a life of hard work. As he helped her to her feet, their eyes met, and for a moment, the world seemed to still around them. Thank you for today, she said softly. Thank you for coming, he replied, his voice equally low. I'd very much like to see you again tomorrow if you're willing. She knew she should take more time, be more cautious, but the thought of not seeing him again made her heart constrict. I'd like that too. The ride back to Angel's Camp was filled with easy conversation, with Thomas occasionally joining in when the topic turned to local matters. By the time they reached town, the sun was beginning to set, painting the buildings in golden light. As they approached the Porter home, Emma saw her mother waiting on the porch, her expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. Rudy helped Emma dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Until tomorrow," he murmured, tipping his hat to Agnes Porter before riding away with Thomas, who was returning the horses to the livery. "You're flushed, Emma," her mother observed as they entered the house. Was the ride too strenuous? Emma knew her color had nothing to do with exertion. "Not at all. It was lovely to be out in the fresh air. And your companion, was he appropriate?" "Perfectly," Emma assured her. "Rudy is a gentleman, mother, despite his occupation," Agnes sighed. "It's not his occupation that concerns me, Emma. It's the timing. You've had a terrible shock." "I worry that you might be vulnerable right now." Emma understood her mother's concerns, but they seemed distant compared to the feelings that were blossoming inside her. "I appreciate your worry, mother, but I'm not some fragile flower that will wilt at the first kind word from a handsome man." "So you find him handsome?" Agnes asked with a hint of a smile. "I'd have to be blind not to," Emma admitted, returning the smile. "But it's more than that. He's kind and interesting, and he sees me, mother, not just as George Porter's daughter or Richard's former fiancé, but as myself." Agnes's expression softened. "That's a rare gift, Emma. Just promise me you'll be careful with your heart. Take time to know yourself before you give it away again." "I will," Emma promised, though she wondered if it might already be too late for caution where Rudy Lawson was concerned. Over the next week, Emma and Rudy spent every possible moment together. They rode in the afternoons, dined together in the evenings, and sometimes simply walked through town, talking about everything and nothing. Thomas continued to accompany them on their rides, though his presence became increasingly perfunctory as the days passed. To Emma's surprise, the town's gossip about her and Rudy was more curious than condemning. Perhaps it was because the full story of Richard and Clara's betrayal had spread, garnering Emma universal sympathy. Or perhaps it was because Rudy had charmed nearly everyone he met, from the stern-faced banker to the chatty general store owner. Even her father, initially skeptical, had warmed to Rudy after the cowboy had helped him reorganize the mercantile's storeroom, a task that had been neglected for months. "He works hard, I'll give him that," George admitted one evening after Rudy had escorted Emma home from dinner. "And he seems genuinely fond of you." "He is," Emma said with certainty, "and I'm fond of him." George studied his daughter's face. "This is happening very quickly, Emma. Are you sure you're not just rebounding from Richard's betrayal?" It was a fair question, one Emma had asked herself repeatedly. "I've thought about that, father, but what I feel for Rudy is nothing like what I felt for Richard. With Richard, everything was so predictable, safe. With Rudy, it's as though I'm truly alive for the first time." Her father nodded slowly. "I see, and what of his wandering nature? He's a cowboy, Emma. They don't typically settle in one place." "We've talked about that," Emma said. "He's been thinking of buying land, starting his own ranch. He has savings. Here in Angel's Camp." George asked, raising an eyebrow. Emma hesitated. "We haven't discussed specifics yet." The truth was, she and Rudy had been carefully avoiding that particular topic. Their time together existed in a sort of bubble, separate from questions of the future. But Emma knew the bubble couldn't last forever. Rudy's work for the Hendersons was nearly complete, and soon he would need to move on unless something, or someone, gave him reason to stay. The following afternoon, Emma and Rudy rode to their favorite spot in the foothills, a small clearing overlooking the valley where wildflowers grew in abundance. Thomas, now comfortable with his role as chaperone, settled himself a discreet distance away with a book. "I have something for you," Rudy said, reaching into his saddlebag. He withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. "What's this?" Emma asked, surprised. "Open it and see," he replied with a smile. Emma carefully untied the string and unwrapped the package. Inside was a small leather-bound journal, the cover embossed with a design of stars and mountains. "It's beautiful," she said, running her fingers over the soft leather. "I thought you could use it to write down your adventures," Rudy explained, or your thoughts or stories. Whatever you want, really. The thoughtfulness of the gift touched Emma deeply. Thank you, I'll treasure it. There's something else, Rudy said, his expression growing serious. I've been thinking a lot about the future, Emma, my future, our future if you're willing. Emma's heart began to race. What do you mean? He took her hands in his. I've never met anyone like you, Emma Porter. You're strong and brave and beautiful inside and out. These past days with you have been the happiest of my life. Mine too, Emma whispered, hardly daring to believe where this conversation was heading. I know it's fast, Rudy continued, his blue eyes never leaving hers. I know people will say we're rushing things, but sometimes when something's right, you just know it. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small gold ring with a single pearl set in the center. This was my mother's. I've carried it with me all these years, waiting for the right woman to give it to. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Rudy. I'm not asking for an immediate answer, he said quickly. And I'm not asking you to leave Angel's camp. In fact, I've been looking at a piece of land about 5 miles from here. Good water, good grazing. It would make a fine horse ranch. You'd stay? Emma asked, hope blossoming in her chest. For you, I'd do anything, Rudy said simply. I love you, Emma Porter. I think I've loved you since the moment I saw you standing in that church doorway, holding your head high despite everything. I know it's soon, but Emma silenced him with a finger to his lips. It is soon, she agreed. Too soon for most people to understand, but I understand. I love you too, Rudy Lawson. The joy that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Does that mean? It means yes, Emma said, her own smile matching his. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll build a life with you. Yes to everything. Rudy slipped the ring onto her finger and then, with a glance to ensure Thomas was still absorbed in his book, he leaned forward and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, respectful of their situation, but it contained a promise of deeper passion to come. When they parted, Emma felt dizzy with happiness. Your parents might not be thrilled, Rudy warned, though his smile never dimmed. They'll come around, Emma said confidently. Especially when they see how happy you make me. As they rode back to Angel's camp that afternoon, Emma felt as though she were floating above the saddle. The pearl ring on her finger caught the sunlight, sending little flashes of brightness that seemed to mirror the joy in her heart. She knew there would be raised eyebrows and whispered comments about her quick engagement so soon after being jilted. She knew her parents would have concerns about Rudy's stability and intentions. But for the first time in her life, Emma Porter was making a choice based solely on what she wanted, not on what others expected of her. And what she wanted, with absolute certainty, was a life with Rudy Lawson. When they reached the Porter home, Emma took a deep breath before dismounting. Come inside with me, she said to Rudy. It's time we talked to my parents properly. Thomas, sensing the importance of the moment, tactfully offered to take Rudy's horse back to the livery along with his own. With a grateful nod, Rudy handed over the reins and followed Emma up the path to her front door. They found her parents in the parlor, her father reading the newspaper while her mother mended a shirt. Both looked up in surprise when Emma and Rudy entered hand in hand. Mother, father, Emma began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. Rudy and I have something to tell you. Agnes set aside her mending, her eyes immediately going to the ring on Emma's finger. Oh, Emma, George Porter lowered his newspaper slowly. I see. And when did this development occur? This afternoon, Rudy said, stepping forward. Mr. Porter, Mrs. Porter, I love your daughter. I know our courtship has been brief, but my feelings for her are deep and genuine. I would be honored to have your blessing for our marriage. Marriage. Agnes echoed, her voice faint. But it's only been less than 2 weeks since I was supposed to marry Richard, Emma finished for her. I know how it looks, Mother, but this isn't a rebound or a hasty decision to save face. I love Rudy in a way I never loved Richard. George studied the young couple before him. And what are your plans, Mr. Lawson? Emma mentioned you're considering buying land. Rudy nodded. Yes, sir. I've been looking at the old Thompson property outside of town. It needs work, but it has potential for a horse breeding operation. I have savings and I'm not afraid of hard work. A horse ranch is a precarious business, George pointed out. What if it fails? Then I'll find other work. Rudy replied without hesitation. I have skills beyond cowboying, Mr. Porter. I can build, I can farm, I can even keep books if needed. Whatever it takes to provide for Emma and any family we might have. There was a long silence as George and Agnes exchanged looks, having one of those wordless conversations that long-married couples develop. Finally, George cleared his throat. Well, Emma has always had a good head on her shoulders, despite recent evidence to the contrary. He shot his daughter a look that was more fond than reproving. If she trusts you, Mr. Lawson, then I'm inclined to do the same. But I would ask that you allow for a proper engagement period this time. Say 3 months. Emma felt relief wash over her. Thank you, Father. 3 months is more than reasonable, Rudy agreed, his smile lighting up his face. And I appreciate your trust, sir. Agnes, however, still looked troubled. Emma, are you absolutely certain after what happened with Richard? I'm more certain about Rudy than I ever was about Richard, Emma said firmly. Mother, when I'm with him, I feel like the person I'm meant to be, not the person everyone expects me to be. Something in Emma's words seemed to resonate with her mother. Agnes's expression softened, and she rose to embrace her daughter. Then I wish you every happiness, my dear. She turned to Rudy, offering her hand. Welcome to our family, Mr. Lawson. Thank you, Mrs. Porter, Rudy said, taking her hand with obvious relief. I promise to take good care of your daughter. See that you do, George said, rising to shake Rudy's hand. Now, why don't you both stay for supper? We have much to discuss. As they settled around the dining table that evening, Emma felt a sense of rightness that had been missing from her engagement to Richard. This was what love should feel like. She realized not a comfortable arrangement or a practical partnership, but a meeting of hearts and minds that made the world seem brighter, fuller, more alive. When Rudy left that night, he kissed her hand at the door under her parents' watchful eyes. Until tomorrow, my love, he whispered, his blue eyes full of promises that made Emma's heart race. Until tomorrow, she echoed, watching him walk away with a lightness in his step that matched the lightness in her own heart. The next 3 months passed in a whirlwind of activity. True to his word, Rudy purchased the Thompson property, a sprawling piece of land with a dilapidated farmhouse and several outbuildings. With Emma's help, along with assistance from her father and various townspeople who had warmed to the charming Cowboy, he set about transforming the neglected property into a working horse ranch. The farmhouse required the most immediate attention. Years of neglect had left it barely habitable, with a leaking roof and rotting floorboards in several rooms. Emma threw herself into the restoration project with enthusiasm, selecting paint colors, ordering new curtains, and helping wherever she could. You're getting your hands dirty, Miss Porter, Rudy teased one afternoon as they worked together to strip peeling wallpaper from the parlor. Emma laughed, brushing a strand of hair from her face with a paper dust-covered hand. I'm discovering I rather like it. There's something satisfying about seeing the results of your labor. That's the secret to happiness, I think, Rudy said thoughtfully. Creating something with your own hands, building something that will last. As the weeks passed, Angel's Camp gradually accepted the unlikely romance between the jilted bride and the wandering cowboy. The initial gossip faded, replaced by genuine interest in their renovation project and upcoming wedding. Even those who had been most skeptical, like Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, eventually came around. I must admit, I had my doubts about Mr. Lawson, she confided to Emma during a chance meeting at the general store. But he's proven himself quite industrious, and it's clear he adores you. Yes, he does, Emma agreed, unable to keep the happiness from her voice. And I him. Well, you deserve some happiness after that dreadful business with Richard Blackstone, Mrs. Henderson sniffed. Have you heard any more about him and that Wilson girl? Emma shook her head. No, and I don't care to. That chapter of my life is closed. It was true. The pain of Richard's betrayal had faded to a dull ache, more an insult to her pride than a wound to her heart. Occasionally, she wondered what had driven him to such a dramatic escape, but those thoughts were fleeting, quickly replaced by planning for her future with Rudy. One evening in late July, as they sat on the newly repaired porch of what would soon be their home, Rudy took Emma's hand. I got a letter today, he said. From New York, Emma's heart skipped a beat. From Richard? No, Rudy assured her quickly. From my cousin, he's a lawyer there. I asked him to look into something for me. What sort of something? Emma asked, curious. Rudy hesitated. I was worried that your ex-fiancé might try to cause trouble for us, so I wanted to know what he was up to. According to my cousin, Richard Blackstone and Clara Wilson were married in New York last month. He's working for her father's shipping company now. Emma absorbed this information, surprised by how little it affected her. I hope they'll be happy, she said finally. Rudy studied her face. You mean that, don't you? I do, Emma confirmed. If Richard had gone through with our wedding, neither of us would have found the happiness we deserved. He would have been trapped in a marriage he didn't want, and I would never have met you. Rudy pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. His loss really was my greatest fortune. Emma smiled, remembering the first words he'd spoken to her outside the livery stable. You were awfully sure of yourself for a man who had just met a woman jilted at the altar. Not sure, Rudy corrected, his blue eyes serious, hopeful, and grateful for the chance to know you, even if it had only ever been as friends. The sincerity in his voice made Emma's heart swell with love. I'm glad you took that chance. As their wedding day approached, Emma found herself increasingly grateful for Richard's desertion. Had he gone through with their marriage, she would have settled into a life that fit her like an ill-made dress, technically proper, but never quite right. With Rudy, she felt free to be herself, to explore her interests and express her opinions without fear of disapproval. The night before their wedding, Emma sat at her dressing table, brushing out her hair. Rebecca perched on the edge of the bed, watching her with a contented smile. You look different, her sister observed. Happier, more yourself. Emma set down her brush, considering her reflection. I feel different, more certain, more alive. I want that someday, Rebecca said wistfully. What you and Rudy have, you'll find it, Emma assured her. When the time is right. Did you ever imagine, when Richard left you at the altar, that you'd be getting married just 3 months later, to a cowboy no less? Emma laughed. Never in 1,000 years, but now I can't imagine any other path. The wedding day dawned clear and warm, a perfect August morning. Unlike her first wedding, which had been an elaborate affair with half the town in attendance, Emma had opted for a simple ceremony in the garden behind her parents' home. Only close family and friends were invited, creating an intimate gathering that felt more meaningful than the ostentatious event Richard's family had insisted upon. Emma chose a new dress for the occasion, a gown of ivory silk with delicate lace trim that her mother and sister had helped her make. As Agnes fastened the buttons up the back, she paused, placing her hands on Emma's shoulders. I'm proud of you, Emma, she said softly. You've shown remarkable strength these past months. Emma turned to embrace her mother. Thank you for supporting me even when you had doubts. A mother always has doubts, Agnes said with a smile. It's part of loving your children, but I've never seen you as happy as you are with Rudy, and that's what matters most. When the time came for the ceremony, George Porter escorted his daughter into the garden where Rudy waited beneath an arch of summer roses. Unlike Richard, who had always been meticulously groomed and dressed in the latest fashion, Rudy wore a simple black suit that set off his sun-bronzed skin and golden hair. But it was his expression that captured Emma's heart, anew the look of wonder and love in his eyes as she walked toward him. You're beautiful, he whispered when she reached him. So are you, she replied, making him grin. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Rudy cupped Emma's face in his hands and kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. Mrs. Lawson, he murmured against her lips. Mr. Lawson, she returned, smiling through her tears. The small reception that followed was filled with laughter and warmth. Even Mrs. Henderson, who had initially been the most vocal critic of their hasty engagement, raised a glass to toast the couple. To Emma and Rudy, she declared, may your love continue to flourish, proving that sometimes the heart knows best, even when wisdom counsels caution. As the celebration continued, Rudy drew Emma aside for a moment of privacy beneath the shade of an oak tree. Happy? He asked, his blue eyes searching hers. Completely, she assured him. Though a little nervous about tonight, a flush crept up Rudy's neck. We'll take things as slowly as you need, Emma. I would never rush you. She reached up to touch his face, marveling at the fact that this good, kind man was now her husband. I trust you, Rudy, with everything. As the afternoon waned, the newlyweds bid farewell to their guests and departed for their new home. The farmhouse transformation wasn't entirely complete, but they had prioritized making the bedroom and kitchen comfortable. The rest would come with time. Rudy insisted on carrying Emma across the threshold, setting her down gently in the parlor where fresh flowers brightened the newly papered walls. "Welcome home, Mrs. Lawson," he said, his voice husky with emotion. Emma looked around at the home they had created together, her heart full to bursting. "Our home," she said wonderingly, "it still seems like a dream." "If it is a dream, I never want to wake up," Rudy replied, drawing her into his arms. That night, in the privacy of their bedroom, Emma discovered the final piece of the puzzle that had been missing from her relationship with Richard. With gentle hands and whispered words of love, Rudy introduced her to the physical side of marriage, a joining that felt as natural and right as their emotional connection. In his arms, Emma found a passion she hadn't known she was capable of feeling, a completion that left her breathless with joy. Afterward, as they lay tangled in each other's arms, Rudy traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "I never thought I'd find this," he confessed quietly. "A woman who fills my heart, a place that feels like home. I've been wandering so long, Emma, but now I know I was just looking for you." Emma pressed her lips to his chest, feeling his heart beat strong and steady beneath her touch. "And I was waiting for you, even when I didn't know it." The weeks and months that followed were filled with hard work and happiness as they established their horse ranch. Rudy proved to have a natural talent for breeding and training, while Emma discovered an aptitude for business management that surprised them both. Together, they built a reputation for quality horses that gradually spread beyond Angel's Camp to neighboring communities. Emma continued to help her father at the mercantile 2 days a week, enjoying the connection to town life while embracing her new role as a rancher's wife. She found an unexpected fulfillment in the physical labor of ranch life, the satisfaction of mending fences, tending a vegetable garden, learning to break a spirited colt under Rudy's patient instruction. Their first anniversary arrived with a special announcement. Over a candlelit dinner in their now fully restored dining room, Emma shared the news she'd been suspecting for several weeks. "Rudy," she said, taking his hand across the table, "I believe we're going to have a baby next spring." The joy that spread across his face was a sight she knew she'd remember forever. "A baby? You're sure?" Emma nodded, laughing as he leapt from his chair to kneel beside hers, pressing his ear to her still flat stomach as though he might hear the tiny heartbeat already. "Hello in there," he whispered. "This is your pa speaking. Your ma and I can't wait to meet you." Emma ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full it seemed impossible it wouldn't burst. "What do you hope for, a boy or a girl?" Rudy looked up at her, his eyes shining. "Healthy. That's all that matters, though a little girl with your eyes would be mighty fine." The following April, just as the wildflowers began blooming in the meadows around their ranch, Emma gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas George Lawson, honoring both the young man who had chaperoned their courtship rides and Emma's father. "He has your eyes," Emma murmured as she cradled their son, marveling at the tiny fingers and tuft of dark blonde hair. Rudy sat beside her on the bed, one arm around her shoulders, the other gently stroking his son's cheek. "And your spirit, I'd wager. He's going to be a heartbreaker, this one." "Like his father," Emma teased. "I only broke one heart, and that was my own before I found you," Rudy replied, kissing her temple. "I love you, Emma Lawson." "And I love you," she replied, knowing that no words could adequately express the depth of her feelings for this man who had transformed her life with his courage, kindness, and unwavering love. As little Thomas grew, so did the Lawson Ranch. By their 5th anniversary, they had established themselves as one of the premier horse breeders in the region, with buyers coming from as far as San Francisco to purchase their stock. Their family had grown as well, with the addition of a daughter, Rebecca Agnes, born 2 years after Thomas. One bright morning in the summer of 1881, Emma sat on the front porch, watching Rudy teaching 5-year-old Thomas to ride a gentle pony while Rebecca toddled around the yard, chasing butterflies. The scene filled her with a contentment she had never imagined possible on that terrible day when Richard had left her standing alone at the altar. "Mama, look," Thomas called, sitting tall in the saddle as Rudy led the pony in a circle. "I'm riding all by myself." "I see you, sweetheart." Emma called back, clapping her hands. "You're doing wonderfully." Rebecca abandoned her butterfly chase to come sit in Emma's lap, her dark curls tickling under Emma's chin. "Me ride too, Mama." "When you're a bit bigger, little one," Emma promised, hugging her daughter close. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, Emma and Rudy sat together on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Rudy's arm was warm around her shoulders, his presence as solid and reassuring as it had been from the first. "Happy?" He asked, the same question he'd asked on their wedding day and countless times since. "More than I ever dreamed possible," Emma replied honestly. "Do you ever think about how differently our lives might have turned out if Richard hadn't run away that day?" Rudy considered this. "Sometimes. I might have moved on from Angel's camp without ever speaking to you, might still be wandering from ranch to ranch, never knowing what I was missing." He squeezed her gently. "But I prefer to think that we would have found each other somehow. Some things are just meant to be." Emma rested her head on his shoulder, thinking about the twists of fate that had brought them together: a jilted bride, a wandering cowboy, and a bold declaration that his loss was her greatest fortune. "You were right that day, you know," she said softly. "About what?" "About Richard's loss being your fortune, but it was my fortune too." She tilted her face up to his. "The greatest fortune of my life." Rudy's kiss was as sweet and tender as their first, filled with a love that had only deepened with the passing years. "Mine too, Emma Lawson, mine too." As they sat together in the gathering darkness, listening to the night sounds of their ranch and the soft breathing of their children through the open windows, Emma felt a profound gratitude for the unexpected path her life had taken. What had seemed like devastation that April day in 1876 had led her to a joy beyond anything she could have imagined: a true partnership, a genuine love, and a life rich with purpose and meaning. Sometimes, Emma reflected as she nestled closer to her husband, the best dreams are the ones you never knew you had until life surprises you with their possibility. And sometimes, the greatest fortune comes disguised as heartbreak, waiting for the moment when you're brave enough to embrace a new beginning.